Hello, this is Dean Radin, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hello, this is Dr. Raymond Moody, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
This is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
This is Jeanne Mayell, and this is Your Superior Self.
Perfection. Jeanne, thank you so much for joining the show. I had to have you back. Every time I talk to you, it seems like it's a very meaningful and powerful conversation. We talked on the show previously. It was a great episode. And then we talked again on the phone. And I think we talked like 2 hours about our just interpretation of this world, Christ consciousness, and everything in between. So I want to say thank you for taking the time. Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I so enjoyed our last talk.
What have you been up to? I know you're like so busy with your courses and helping others become more intuitive and understanding what that means for them. And I know you're bursting at the seams with all this, great experiences that you've had on these courses, but, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm almost finished teaching a 10-week course called Become Deeply Intuitive. And it's been evolving over the years. I taught it, this is the 7th time. And it started out, I called it the intuitive way. And I would just teach very specific skills that are really psychic stuff type skills, like learning the tarot and learning how to read the future and how to read another person and that sort of thing. But a couple of years ago, I changed it to become deeply intuitive, because intuition is something everyone has and everyone uses it one way or another. But wouldn't it be nice if we could realize how we're using it, when we're using it, rather than just limit it to the course teaching, just to these sort of psychic skills that people use? What if we could just really do a deep dive into intuition in general? And so I changed the course this time, and I still teach all those skills, and they're still pretty fun and miraculous. But I also included something in it called everyday intuition, like how are we intuitive on a regular everyday basis? And it's and so I threw that in. I wove that in, and it was nice, because there are certainly ways that we all, in a way, are intuitively intuitive. Like there are things we do that what makes us smile, for example. What draws us to something, when we feel enthusiasm, and enthusiasm is from the Greek. It means God flowing through you. And so there are many ways that we are directed by our own psyche. And so I talked about that. It's not the whole course. I just weave it in, but it's really important that we are aware of how our psyche talks to us constantly. Our nervous system talks to us. It's constantly telling us, no, don't do that, or tingles, or when people get a stomach ache, and when they are about to make a big decision, and is that telling them don't do it, or what? And so I wove that in, and I think that was helpful. And it's not easy to practice it, because in our society, and maybe in many societies, we're trained as children to overrule our intuition. Do what mommy says, right? You want to become an artist? How are you going to make a living at that? You don't want to do that. You hear that a lot. You don't want to do that. And so it's really important, and maybe more important than ever before. Of course, every society, every generation says that, but I'm going to say it. It's more important than ever before that we listen to our gut, that we listen to our bodies, and that we learn to know when we're hearing yes and when we're hearing no, when we're hearing go and when we're hearing back away. Those are important because we really need to rely on each individual has this gift, and we need to rely on our truth. It's really related to being authentic and finding your truth rather than being told what to believe or what to do. So that's one aspect of the course. It's not the whole thing, but it's something I've added, and I've enjoyed doing that. And I have to enjoy doing, practicing what I preach too, right? Learning as a result of teaching this. Codependency is a big issue for especially empathic people. Empathic people are generally the kinds of people who come to my courses. And they want to connect with people, they feel connection, and they can get themselves in situations and relationships where they are overruling their own gut in order to protect or take care of someone. And so it's funny how it seems like in the course, and I would have to say in my own life, as a result of teaching this, I'm learning to let go of people where it isn't good for me, even though I wish that I could take care of them.
That's pretty powerful. So
Fun stuff.
do you think the body has its own consciousness? Like,
What a great question.
because when you're speaking of that, and I heard something today when I was listening to an Audible book, and I totally had an idea and I lost it. From that point of the day to now, like I had an idea and I totally lost it. But it was like, do you think the body has its own consciousness, where its consciousness is its own, not the mind, not my mind controlling it, but it has its own type of awareness?
Well, if I'm understanding you correctly, absolutely. The body, the senses, the nervous system is constantly aware, awake, and determining. And you feel it in your gut, you can feel it in your skin, you feel it in twitches and in pulsing and in getting red hot and getting cold. This is all happening in the body. And so when people, because I teach people to do pretty bold psychic type stuff, like where they make a prediction or they have a gut reaction, and then we check it out. We try to see, is it accurate? Did it happen? One of the things that happens is that you feel a lot of the time that you got something from your body, but your brain did not understand it, and it didn't seem to come from logic. It didn't seem to come from your memory. It's just something you picked up. And so that happens over and over again, that they find themselves writing down or saying things and saying, I don't know why I'm getting this. I don't know what this is. I'm not sure where this is coming from. And my view is that it's bypassing the sort of executive function, cognitive functions. It's coming from the body. So the body is equipped, it's the nervous system. The nervous system is just millions of antennae, and they're constantly reacting and detecting. Animals have this. We all any creature with a nervous system has this. And some are more primitive than others. But yeah, if that's what you meant body versus what, the brain or the mind?
Instead of like how you have I wish I could remember the thought that I had, because I was listening to a neuroscience this morning in her book about consciousness and meditation, and a thought occurred to me, and I can't draw upon it right now. It was such an amazing idea of just the body of, I am the mind, the awareness, like the mind, right? Not the brain, right? Not the actual physical brain. The brain, in my opinion, does not create consciousness, right? The mind that I am is outside of the body. So when we leave this body as consciousness, as awareness, as spirit, whatever you want to call it, soul, like if we were to look at it from outside of ourselves, would the body have, even though the life force is gone, will it still have like memory? You know what I mean? Like cell memory. Would it still have like, it was so fascinating how she was describing how the cells in our body communicate with one another, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what if like each cell has its own consciousness and it does its own thing because of the energy that I am from the universe is giving it life, and it's just functioning on its own. It's kind of like a smaller version of us as humanity. That's what I meant.
That's the analogy, is like the human civilization or race we think that we feel autonomous in many ways. We're like the complete package of thinking, but we also work as a great big giant, like amoeba of humanity. And so it is like a hologram, within. And I think about we're just free flowing here, but I think about the secret life of trees and the people, mostly women, who have been writing about how we have these grandmother trees, and they, through their root system, through using algae and fungi, which I don't know my terms, but that they communicate with the rest of the forest. They warn them, they send them nutrients, they do all these things. So then we think that somehow we've got this image of a tree as like a person able to do these things. Well, if you break it down, it looks like tiny microorganisms are doing the work, right? They're creating this chain of information and passing along. Well, how is that any different from us? We are comprised. I think that Jeanne knows what she's doing, right? I don't really think that's quite completely true. I think that there's a conscious mind, there's a cognitive mind, but there's a lot of me that's operating. For example, just the autonomic nervous system itself. I'm not aware that it's doing anything. I breathe automatically. I deep breathe if I'm scared, then I'm going to do. We do so many things that our body just does, and who's doing it, right? That's kind of what it is. Who's doing it? And there are all these cells that are coordinating with each other, and I don't know if each cell is somehow autonomous and has its own consciousness, but I'd need to think about it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, these are just the thoughts that I think about. Like, these are just like, wow, what if we're just like just one of many cells that's in a larger scale version of it's just when I'm driving, like my mind just goes in like some really crazy rabbit holes, especially if I'm listening to like this lady talk about her meditations and how deep she goes. And then I don't know, consciousness, and you and I have had some pretty serious conversations about consciousness. It's like that last frontier that science is trying to understand more of, but the paradigm hasn't changed, right? So you're going to get more of the same. It's, right now our paradigm is more of a bottom up type of philosophy. And I think it needs to be turned on its head and more so be a top down, where the fundamental part of our consciousness is that consciousness that is at the base of the model, and we have to go from there and kind of, I guess, reverse engineer our awareness. And it's very tough because you can't put a physical instrument to that. You can't physically measure someone in let's say in meditation when they get in deep states of theta. Like, you can't really get an accurate report of their experience, because once you try to do that, they're out of that experience. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you try to measure flow state. You can't measure it while you're in it, because as soon as you try to measure it, like, they're out of it.
Right.
So, consciousness to me is just like that last frontier of us trying to understand, like, what is it? It's like this gold rush right now. It's like, Everyone's trying to comprehend it. And your work is very fascinating to me because you're showing people a different side of consciousness that they weren't comfortable with because of today's paradigm, that everything is, and it has to be systematically observed, or it has to be measured physically. And what you're teaching people, just from our previous conversation, like 15 minutes ago, is you're allowing people to hold items, heirlooms, from their family members, and they're creating, or they're downloading information about those individuals that they wouldn't have necessarily have learned outside of that.
So that really gets us to the discussion of consciousness in a different way. So psychometry is been done for a long time, and not many people have actually experienced it. And so I always have one night with my classes where I tell everyone to bring an heirloom, because it has a double whammy effect of, there is not only is there consciousness in every object there is. Consciousness is present throughout the universe, and we don't even fully understand it, but here's what it means to me in what we did last night. So or Monday night. So we have, everyone's got an object. I don't remember what I had, but somebody had her mother's earrings. Somebody else had his great-grandfather's hat. And you hold the object, and then you close your eyes, and you just, if your imagination is, if you've exercised your imagination enough and practiced enough to get visions, then you start getting little movies. And I remember one time somebody brought a pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather. And the man who brought it was an elderly man. So his grandfather had been around, was, a long time ago. And I didn't know who it belonged to, because we would play this game where we would pretend that I would have everybody put the objects in a hat, and then we would pass them around and hold them. So we didn't know whose watch it was. So I closed my eyes, and I'm holding this watch, and I start to see an image, a symbolic image. I saw a man who was made his living with his two fingers, I did not know what the heck that meant, but I wrote it down. Then I'm still meditating on the watch, and I see a milkman in a truck. I saw something else too. And this was the real thing that I will never forget. I saw a bunch of young men in a World War I truck in the rain, and I felt I was in Europe. They were in Europe, and they were all huddled in the back of this truck. And it was so powerful. It looked like a movie, like a Spielberg movie, but it was more real because it looked dismal and they looked miserable. And I just knew I was looking at World War I soldiers. So then afterwards, I've done this many times with different objects. So afterwards, the man, he says, "Oh, that's my watch. My grandfather was a telegraph operator." That's, you make your hand with, with your fingers. And then when he died, he gave it to my father, who was the milkman. So I got the milkman part. But somewhere in there, and I'm not remembering all the details, there was World War I, and he was a soldier. I think it was the milkman, but it might have been in between, a brother. He was a soldier, and I saw them there. So what does that mean? What does it mean? Now, last night I was focusing on a woman's, I was focusing on an object that I had that my mother-in-law had left us, which was a mug, some kind of Bavarian mug. And I thought I was going to see something about my mother-in-law, but it was an antique. So I saw a little of her, but then it went back further, and I saw a woman in a long dress, just la la la. She was like, she was at a ball or something, or in her house entertaining. It was clear that I was looking in the 1800s. She was kind of obnoxious and pretty vain, and I could see her. She was walking through my imagination. So, okay, what does this mean? What is it that the mind or the lives, scenes from the lives of people I've never met are in these objects, that you can hold the objects and it's like a record player. It's like a record player. It's like you've scratched a record player with a needle and you hear them sing. So what is that? And I started to think about it. There is a man named Stuart Hameroff. You would love to interview him. You should interview him. He is an anesthesiologist and he describes himself as a consciousness scientist. He runs a very technical and large conference every year out of the University of Arizona. He's got many letters after his name. Stuart Hameroff, I think somebody described him, somebody in the know described him as a genius, but he works as an anesthesiologist, which is consciousness, right? This is what they are focused on, consciousness and unconsciousness and all those states that you're talking about. But mostly what he's interested in is understanding consciousness, like at the cellular level. He talks about present throughout the universe, these tiny little quantum size objects that are, I think they're called qualia. I'm getting now a little to the edge of my knowledge.
Works, maybe? I don't know.
He said I can look it up, but didn't know I was going to talk about him, but he says they're everywhere. And he talks about like when you make a scratch in an object, like if I were to scratch my floor, right, just because I was wearing some shoes and I skidded across the floor and made a scratch, that I have now opened up a kind of my life, my mind is going to be there in that scratch. I remembered when I went back to the house that I grew up in once, because they had an open house, they were selling it, and I went back there like how many years, 30 years later, and they totally redid the whole house, everything, all the floors and the ceilings, walls, they even had an addition. But I went up to where the attic stairs were and opened the door and looked down and saw the scratches on the floor because they had not redone the floors to the attic. And it was almost like opening a Pandora's box of consciousness. It was like everything came up out of those scratches. And I think about Stuart Hameroff and what he's saying about when we handle and hold objects. It's something as simple as there are these microscopic things that are consciousness, which some consciousness scientists think were precursors to humanity, that they determined us rather than that we determined it. And you have to really dive deep into it, and I haven't, because it's so technical. The scientific view of consciousness is really technical, and it's all different points of view, and it is a mystery. But he is somebody, I think, who I find credible more than anyone. I like him the most because he doesn't have this belief, for example, that everything is in the brain, and that if you have enough bits, you can create a robot that has consciousness. He doesn't believe that, and neither do I, because there is much more to our mind and our understanding than is in our body, much more. And so you can't build a robot that has consciousness. I don't believe that. I think that's kind of almost, you might say, such an opposite viewpoint of what I have. I feel from readings I've done, from moments in which I've walked in the woods and felt the heavens open up, I have felt there's a much higher kind of consciousness that comes to us. And I'm not religious. I really listen to what happens inside of me and what I sense, but I think that there is something much bigger. And I don't know what it exactly is, but I get voices, I get guidance. I feel that the people who've lived on this planet are still in some ways here. And at a minimum, they're here in the objects that they've left behind, in the earth. But I think they're here in other ways too, that they're I feel them sometimes, especially now that we're dealing now with unprecedented earth changes, climate changes. And I get these feelings, these senses of ancient people coming back and saying, look, we're going to help you try to figure out how to survive this. And you're going to need our help because it's going to get really rough. And I don't know how to, I don't like to come up with dogma, beliefs. I'd rather play around with what is my experience? What have I felt? And it's really hard to argue with experience. The hard part is interpreting the experience, like what is it really? But I'd much rather play around with the wonder of it all and toss that about rather than to say that I know something that is true, especially if it's something that's been handed down like dogmatic in some way. So
isn't that the quandrum though? Like everything is, I mean, science is not proof. Like you can never prove in science. You have evidence, right? Like that's that's even like with religion. Yeah. I mean, you could have ancient old texts, but you still can't prove anything. And that's the problem. It's like we have these strong belief systems. I mean, we've had wars. We've had, the church was Middle Ages. They were the high priests. They executed scientists for believing that the earth was round and that we weren't the center of the universe. I mean, they've done these things, and now the tides have turned, and now the scientists are the high priests, and everyone is, that's, I mean, unless it can be replicated, no one believes you. And then even then, like you'll find you'll see variability in different studies, and everything, science is always changing. Everyone thinks, oh, well, science proved this and science proved that. You garner support. You never prove anything, So belief is it's tough because there's a physicist. His name is Tom Campbell, and I've read so much of his work and his literature. He actually has a couple experiments going on right now, but he's an out of body guy. He grew up researching with Bob Monroe. He was one of the founders. I wouldn't say founders, but maybe he's a founder. I don't know, but he was one of the main starters of the Monroe Institute in Virginia, and he helped build a lot of the mechanisms that that helped supply the hemisync to the people there that were a part of those experiments, and they were able to get both hemispheres of the brain to synchronize together and produce different altered states of consciousness where people would have these out-of-body experiences. And he's had over 40 years of research in consciousness, and he's also a physicist. So, and he says the same thing you're talking about, is like,
I'd like to learn more about him.
So here's all right. I just had an interview with him, right? And here's basically a recap of what his his model of consciousness is. So the way that he understands it is that we live in a virtual reality, that the computer and the player are not in this physical reality. It's like World of Warcraft, right? The player is our individualized unit of consciousness, which would be our soul out there. And the computer is the larger consciousness system, which you can call it God. This reality was started by the larger consciousness system, God, creating a construct with rule sets and then hitting the run on a simulation button. And what we see today is the result of the evolution of the construct within those rule sets. This body, the avatar, is the individuated unit of consciousness's tool for growth or being, which is a result in lowering of its entropy and increase in love. So basically, in a nutshell, the larger consciousness system is, if you want to term it God or whatever, the individuated unit of consciousness is a sliver of that, and it's its own entity. And we are an avatar, a player that the individuated unit of consciousness is using to help lower its entropy, increase its being of love so that it can grow up essentially. And we have no recollection of anything is because it's basically created this barrier from it itself. So we are a piece of the individuated unit of consciousness, and we can't remember anything. We're just here in this body using it so that way we can grow up and experience love and entropy. And entropy is like chaos, right? Like the more entropy you have, the more disorder you have, less order, more chaos. The lower entropy that you have is more organization, more
So
basically organization, experience.
Experiencing love is growing up, basically.
Yeah.
Opening your heart, right?
Yeah. It's I can't, like, he has a trilogy, like his book is like, seriously, it's I can't, that's just like a small brief summary of
So
his
I feel that
model.
all the time. I feel that all the time, that in fact, I spent a lot of time in that this morning with somebody that that they were talking about the shadow self, the Jung's shadow self. He was talking about Ukraine and how he has these really, really violent shadow feelings towards the Russians because of their invading Ukraine. And so I started to respond and I said, if you want to evolve, then you need to pour light into the shadow self, which is understanding and understanding the Russian soldiers, understanding them. And he was like, I don't get that. And I was like, no, the shadow self is called the shadow self because it's in the dark. It doesn't see the light. And you feel it, and your job is to feed it light, which is love. And if you feed it love, you grow. And so now you're just adding this other element that is really hard for me to follow, but it's about that we are being used by, we're slivers of consciousness being used by this greater kind of conscious entity that is trying to grow by having us really open in love. Right?
Yeah.
Did I get that
I mean,
right?
it's so like, yeah. So it's
bizarre,
so,
but
it's
I relate to the love part and the fact that there really is only one thing. There's one force, that's love.
Sure. And he uses words and terminology that is separate from dogma. He doesn't want to use God, right? Because of the power of that word, or this power, you know what I mean? Like that it's heavy words. So he doesn't want to use words, terminology that's why he uses larger consciousness system. You can call it God if you want, or source, right? But ultimately it is us trying to realize love and to get to that space. And it's funny you talk about the shadow self. I mean, the shadow, Jung's work was, that is the unconscious part of us, which could be the body, you know, the shadow is, you know, the body has this memory of all of our dramas and all of our experiences that is housed in it. And when we don't heal that, that's when we get diseases. So the shadow is always there. We're just not conscious of it. Like we are totally not conscious of a lot of things in our environment. Like when you focus in on something, like I'm focused in on now, like this conversation, like I'm not conscious of anything else going on. Maybe now that I said that, I'm conscious of things going on, but really your body is just absorbing a lot of that environment, and your perception of this physical reality is so hard to explain because it's only your experience of it, and you're only experiencing it through this 5 senses, which isn't you. It's your interpretation of what that information is saying to you while it's being inputted into this system. So it's really tough to wrap your head around. And
I can wrap my head around some of the things, but certainly everything is subjective.
Yeah.
Everything is an interpretation. And the great physicists said that too, that the quantum physicists said that when you get down to the nitty gritty, when you break open the atoms, you end up with metaphor. You end up with symbol and metaphor. And that's the only way we can understand our universe, is through metaphor. I love that idea.
Sure.
But
he says that a lot too. Metaphors, like everything's a metaphor. Like our spoken language is nothing but a metaphor. Like, how do you describe the word red? like outside of the word? Like, how do you get that essence, right? Like, or if you go, you go outside and go for a walk and you see this amazing sunset, like, how do you capture that? That's the essence of that. We
It's
have
the
to.
same. I mean, and the great thinkers talk about metaphor. And Joseph Conrad, who's one of my favorites writers, talked about the truth of a thing is, he talks about the truth of something is, it's as if the truth is inside a nut or like a coconut, and you can see the light coming out of it, but you can't really, you can see it and it casts shadows, but you can't really see the truth. And Edwin Schrodinger, the quantum physicist, he said that the truth of the universe can only be known in metaphor and symbol. And which is wonderful for those of us who think in terms of metaphor and symbol. Those of us who are more artistic, it's music to my ears, because I figure that metaphor is the only way we're going to understand things that we can't otherwise understand. Because what metaphor does and symbols do is they give us something we can understand, and they say it's like that. It isn't that, but it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what's fun and interesting is that when I meditate on somebody, I'm giving a reading, I see lots of metaphors and symbols, and I will share what I'm seeing. And also this happens in dreams. And the perfection of these metaphors that describe a complicated situation in perfection in a way that I could never have thought of is interesting to me. That the psyche creates these metaphors, these perfect in every nuanced way. It's I can't think of an example at the moment, but they certainly, most really great literature is filled with this stuff. Moby Dick is filled with this. I was just thinking about Moby Dick yesterday, and the whale taking humanity down into the ocean, and what does the whale really represent? What is he? He's nature. I think he's nature. But it's interesting how a really good artist, fiction writer can actually put that truth in a metaphor, in the same way that the nuclear physicist said, well, that's what we see too when we do the math. It's fascinating.
It is. I mean, but the problem is that the Western side of the house, we're very literal, like
Right.
I think
I think it's
Eastern
the same thing.
mysticism, that's all he talked in, is in metaphors.
Yes.
Jesus was
True.
nothing but a guy speaking in metaphors.
That's true.
We're kind of like, show me how to do this. Don't speak in metaphors. Show me, how do I physically tap into that consciousness? What do I do? Do I meditate? Am I doing it right? 10 minutes? Can I access God in 10 minutes? I mean, how do I intuitive? Yeah. So if I hold this right here, I will be able to speak to my grandfather. We want to know how to do things. We want to know how to do it.
You might not be able to speak to him, but if you hold it, if he owned it, there may be a record of moments of his life, like you can never, ever have created. Even if you had movies of him, it will be a real record and a truth. It might not be his whole life. It may be some moments, but you will feel that person. And so he may not be there. It may be just a record. If Stuart Hameroff is right, when he describes these bits of consciousness, it may be that they're scattered everywhere. And so when you and I go, which we will someday, and I don't really know what to say about life after death, but let's just imagine for a moment. I don't like imagining it, but let's just say we're really gone. We leave, we're gone. But we have left behind a record of ourselves. It's all in your house. It's in your clothes. It's in anything you ever owned. It's probably also in the minds of those and the consciousness of those whose lives you have affected, but it is in the physical. It's in the physical. And that's just boggles the mind as to what does that imply? If that is true, and I am telling you, you've got to try this sometime. It works really well with a group. Mm-hmm. Because the group energy amplifies it. And I I think my class was, they were hopping and popping as high as kites. The chat was just so long of, I see this and I see this and I see this. I'm experiencing this. I feel this. I saw my mother on her wedding day. She was really scared. Blah, 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 on and on and on. And it's something you have to experience, because if you just listen to what somebody's saying, it'll just feel like kind of fall flat. But when you experience it, you know it's real. And then you have to ask yourself, what does it mean? How can it be? How could I have seen a moment sitting in a truck in Germany, American soldiers huddled in misery? How could I see that? I didn't know that this person had been in World War I saw the type of truck that it was. And I just knew from the movies that this was not World War II, you know, it was just, or maybe, I don't know, I could tell that it was not something I could have created. It's just so, it's so exciting and wondrous. I think wondrous.
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious if I could ask you about these out of body, because I've had some out of body experiences, but I wouldn't say that I consciously made them happen. They happened. And when they have happened, like when I'm talking about where I left and I was on the edge of the horizon, I was looking down on the edge of space. I've had them in dreams where I'm looking down on the planet.
Mhm.
But it's not like I made it happen. It happened in a sense, it snuck up on me and I had the experience. It's pretty exciting. But so is this guy doing this on purpose? Is he regularly doing it? Is he, what is he?
He is, from what I can understand, and his name is, I want to keep saying Robert Monroe, Thomas A. Campbell. He's the author of My Big Toe, which is his theory on everything. And he's had out of body. He's been working in the non-physical, what he calls a non-physical realm reality for 40 years, doing experiments and testing the larger consciousness system. He thinks, or he explains in his model that we are we are in this video game. This is a virtual reality. Consciousness is digital. So like what you're experiencing, like you're using your techniques as a tool to access the larger consciousness system, which is basically a database, a storehouse of all the memories, everything that's ever happened in this reality. So when you're able to tap into the larger consciousness system, you're going to get these replays, a movie reel of World War II, World War I, whatever that may be. You're going to be able to see it like you were there, because that's what you're a part of. You're from that, right? So you should be able to see information from that database. So like people call it Akashic Records, people call it whatever you want to call it. He calls it a database, and we can all access that. And I've actually, he's very very strict, and you have to do experiments for yourself. And like he tells his people, like, you have to do these experiments for yourself. And he teaches people how to remote view, teaches them how to heal, and to use their imagination to experience conversations with beings or people like my grandfather or other people that have passed away, to have conversations with them and take it, and use your imagination as a tool to kind of have a meaningful conversation that turns into something that you're not creating on your own. Like, so you start using your imagination, you have that conversation.
Yeah, and it starts to come alive. And
it starts to come alive. And then you have to verify. Then you have to verify that information once you get it. But it's pretty crazy.
But it's pretty standard psychic technique. I mean, he may have his own technique, but what I'm hearing is when you use your imagination and you start interacting, say, with your grandfather or with some entity or somebody somewhere far away that is non-local, it does start to take on a life of its own, and you start to realize, oh, I've tapped into something, and you get information. I mean, that I've been doing that for years, but it maybe I will look him up.
Well, he says that he can be in like he can be in different realities. Like he can be in this physical reality and at the same time be in a non-physical reality, like out of body kind of thing. And like you should read his work. I would be very curious to see what you have to say about that. Because that seems like that like I can be at a beach. Like if I'm driving down the road, I can be at a beach and be there like small bits of like 30 seconds of me like trying to, without getting into an accident. I can sit there and imagine myself being at a beach. But I don't know if that's the same thing what he's experiencing, because your out of body experience, was it like you were seeing it with your eyes?
No, so or as far as my imagination, I do that all the time, and go to a place. I do it with my students and with people who come to my meditations. You know, you go to a place, you get on the Caribbean and sit on the beach in the middle of the night and feel the moonlight and the water, and all we do this kind of stuff just regularly with your imagination. What I was describing when I said out of body, so I guess that's out of body. Yeah, it isn't as profound or spectacular, but we do it, and we do it a lot. What I was describing was a couple of moments, a few times where I suddenly realized that I was actually up high looking down on the earth. And for example, I had this vision. It was a dream. It was kind of an early morning dream, very vivid, back in 2012, I think. And I was high. I live in Boston, and I was high suddenly above the clouds in the North Atlantic, like maybe off the coast of Maine somewhere, or Newfoundland. And I was up high in the air, and I was looking down. I could see the curve of the earth. And I knew while I was in this state that it was real. I just felt it was real. Now, if you're a skeptic and you've never experienced that, then you'd probably just go, sure, you thought it was real. Okay, it was real. And it's very different from me sitting and telling and just imagining myself in this moment in the Caribbean, sitting on the beach, that I was in my memory because I was there once and I did that at midnight and I saw the moon and all that. That's different. That's a kind of recreation. I feel like I'm there, but it isn't really as authentic. This, I'm up there. I'm looking above. I'm looking way up high and I'm looking down. I'm looking at the coastline, and I can feel like I'm looking at Newfoundland, and I can see the sun beating down on the water. This is a dream. The sun is beating down the water, and it's telling me that the water is getting warmed by the sun. This is the dream. The water is getting warmed by the sun, and this isn't good. And then I realize that there's no ice, and that there's a path to the North Pole, and there's no ice. And where's the ice? And then, of course, I mean, I'm aware of climate change, but this was back in 2012. And then I see that they have outback groups. They have like kayaking groups, and they're kayaking up, and they're going to the North Pole in kayaks, which is unheard of. Nobody does that. And then I see storms cranking around, coming down from the north. So anyway, to make a long story short, I don't remember the exact date of the dream, although I could look it up. But 2 weeks after that dream, the laboratory in Hawaii that keeps track of atmospheric carbon hit 400 parts per million global carbon level. And it had never hit that in the history of human life on the earth. So it was the dream was I was up there looking down, and it was real. I know it was real. I could tell you another time that I was up there looking down, and it was that same feeling of like, this is real. I'm here. My mind is up there and it's looking down. It's seeing something that I've never seen before. But in addition, in that particular example, it was a prophetic moment. It was almost like, if there's such a thing, spirit took me up there, my mind up there, and said, look, and this is going to happen. And you're about to see a change in all of humanity, because never, ever since humans have been on Earth was there 400 parts per million carbon in the atmosphere. I think it's about 415 now, or 12. I mean, it's bad, but it was that never before. So no, that is a very big deal. That's a profound moment when you see something, because we didn't evolve in that kind of situation. We didn't evolve. But anyway, yeah. So I've had those kind of dreams. That's what I mean. telling you probably more than you asked for, but I had another dream where I was on the edge of the earth, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen it in a movie. I'd never seen it in a film. I knew what it was, but it was too high up. It wasn't like in an airplane.
Mhm.
And so that felt like, to me, that's big time out of body. But it sounds a little like maybe he's talking about you use your imagination actively to put yourself in another place, and then it starts to take on a life of its own, which I have done that.
Well, so it's tough because he won't talk about his experiences, really. Like, he'll talk a little bit about his experiences with his experiments that he's done, but he won't go into detail because he doesn't want people to use that as a baseline for their own. So he doesn't want me, he doesn't want to say, hey, Trey, I did this and I was out of body and I went to the outskirts of the world and I had talked to this being. He's like, if he does that, he's just creating something for you. Like, you're gonna.
He wants you to have your experience, which is really nice.
Yeah, and it's frustrating though because I'm a Western mind and I want to know X, Y, and Z of how I can achieve that. Because I want to have an out of body. Yeah, I can use my imagination. But
The two times that it really happened to me, it wasn't voluntary. And I would say that the most spectacular experiences I've ever had, like intuitive or psychic or whatever, mystical experiences, I wasn't in control and I couldn't replicate it.
Sure. And that's the common thread, really. I mean, everything that I've read is, yeah, there are people out there that can give you some meditations, or you can do like a kind of like a workshop. You can go to the Monroe Institute and they can take you. And some people have success, but for, I think most of us who white knuckle everything, I think it's like doing the meditation for 10 years. And then one day you're sitting there on a pillow and next thing you know, you're at the tip of the world. And it's like, there's nothing you can do to plan for that.
I know, it's really unfair. I know. I was at that Vipassana center at Shelburne Falls, and 2 weeks in which I'm meditating. I didn't like it there. You can't talk. I didn't like the food, but I did it. And then during that 2 weeks, I had one incredible experience. And as soon as I had it, like they tell you to concentrate on the top of your head here for like 4 days, we're talking 10 hours a day. And so I'm doing it. And then they say, okay, you've graduated. Now you can concentrate, I don't know, on some other parts. So I'm concentrating and suddenly this part starts buzzing. I'm sitting in this room. I don't know any of these people. I'm not particularly warming up to this place, but it starts buzzing, and then the buzzing starts to spread, and it spreads more. And the next thing I know, my entire body is like, it's as if all my cells were sparklers and they went off. And it was really great. And it's just like, woo! It's like an incredible rush. I could never, ever have expected anything like that. And I was like looking through it. There was a woman sitting in front of me and I was thinking, is she going through this too? And I'm like, whoa. It lasted about 15 seconds. And then as soon as the meditation was over, I immediately got up from my pillow and I went to the teacher in the front of the room. And I said, I had this experience, what is this? And all she looked at me, her eyes almost looked dead. She looked at me and she said, don't become attached to it. And I get it. I understand. Don't become attached, because it's kind of it's a semi-enlightenment experience that you had. And it'll ruin all your future meditations if you keep wanting to have it.
Oh, she's like, cute. That's real cute. Yeah, no, don't do that. Don't get attached to that. It's like almost like I was listening to something today and it was like talking about the Kundalini effect or experience, which seems amazing, but I can see how people get attached to that. I mean, I've had a couple experiences in meditation that were kind of trippy. Like it was like the movie screen, the black screen that you see when you close your eyes and you get into a nice meditative state, altered state of consciousness. You start seeing 3D objects. You might start seeing faces, or you might start seeing stars. And like one time I was like propelling through space it was kind of like weird because it was like Star Wars in the movie where they hit light speed and all the stars start like becoming lines.
That's pretty special.
Yeah, that is special. But but then it's like you try to, you keep trying, it's like the experiment, now I'm trying to control the independent variable, and control everything else. And it's like you have too much control and then it won't happen again.
We all wonder like what brought it on. And there's so many theories, like what brought that on. And I mean, I've had these experiences where I felt this beautiful entity just popped right in, just like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost. And it's happened 3 times, not in years, not in many years, but each time I was in various situations. I tend to think it was a visitation of some kind. I like to think that it was spirit saying, okay, here I am, feel what it feels like to be me, like an angel in you.
Mhm.
Feel what it feels like. I'm going to leave now. I didn't think they were saying that. I was just experiencing it, but it was almost like they come in, you feel what it feels like, and then they're gone. And you have the rest of your life to think about that, because it was mind-blowingly beautiful and wonderful. And
Well, I don't know if you remember, but
yeah.
last time we talked, you said that before we got on the call, you were kind of, I don't know if you're meditating, you're just kind of hanging out, but you said like an entity or like a feeling came over top of you. Oh, that was like relative to me, maybe, or something like that. Maybe a feeling. Is it similar to that?
No, that was, but I can, that is something I can probably recreate. What it was, it's really just, if you imagine, these like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, where the person got right into her body. Patrick Swayze came into her body. So this was where I was sitting with a bunch of women, teaching them, and I was leading them in a meditation, and it was one of the first times that I have really done that. And it was a very special day, night. And normally I can never remember anyone's name. It was an 8-week course, and there were 8 or 10 women in the class. They were at my house, and normally I'm running around before they get there, like writing down their names so I can try to remember. And then one sits here and here, and I'm trying that's Susan and that's Jill. And so I couldn't get that together. So then we're doing this meditation, and it was very special. We had like a little piece of incense that was supposedly 3,000 years old that someone had mailed to me. And we lit the incense and we all smelled it, and then it was gone. It was 3,000 years old, some petrified wood. And then we had a tea ceremony, like a Japanese tea ceremony. And then I said, okay, let's just all meditate. And I closed my eyes, and I felt her. And it was unmistakable. It was powerful. It wasn't just my imagination. It felt physical. And I felt this being in me. And the feeling was, I was there too. She was there and I was there. We were both in there. But she knew everyone's name. Like, I've always been skeptical about psychics who say, they say it's not me, it's Merlin or something. I just don't know. I don't know if I trust them, but I knew everyone's name. Everyone felt like they were trembling like a baby bird. And that was unmistakable feeling. So I started with the woman on the far left. We were in a semicircle on the floor. I knew her name. I felt her tremble. Somebody once tried to explain that to me. I didn't know what to make of it, other than that my energy, or the energy of this entity, was so different than the women that they felt like they were shaking, like they were afraid, like a baby bird. But I don't know if they were afraid. All I know is that I got something on each woman, and I didn't think anything. I wasn't thinking. I was just speaking. It was really something. After it was done, we just sat there. I don't even remember what the women said. I think I was like I was kind of in a daze at the end. And then about 2 months later, I was meditating with a friend who's very special to me, a woman friend. And we'd met at Kripalu as we were roommates at this yoga center for 2 months. And I'm still friends with her. And this was in the 80s. So it's been a long time. We're still friends. Anyway, I went to her house and we hung out for the evening and we decided to meditate, and we sat like knee to knee, you know, and we lit a candle and the entity came. And she was just there. And I don't even remember anything else, but I felt her and I thought, oh, this is so great. And then she was gone and never came back again. Now I've taken walks in the woods, like hundreds of walks in the woods, and I've called out to her like, spirit, beautiful spirit, you know, speak to me, help me. And I can feel a presence. What happened with you that time, I can bring that out. It's like I'm sitting here at the computer where I've taught many classes and led many special events. And all I have to do is remember a guide, can feel a guide. And it's just a being. I just have to focus on it. And I used to actually ask them, you know, help me if I'm nervous, if I have 100 people I have to teach, right? And they're all going to show up and I'm like, oh. And so I will ask the spirit guide, speak through me, help me. Now, it's never happened that I felt that the way I did that night with those women, but I can feel a kind of energy that is benign. And I don't remember what it was. It was a he. You can feel gender sometimes. It was a he. I don't remember what he was saying about you. But I could certainly start talking like what I would say is that he's saying, this is a good man. You're safe with this man. He's real. He's authentic. He's genuine. He lets himself be vulnerable. He's honest. That makes him a good man. And he is what's the word? Look at Don Quixote. He's on a journey. He wants to understand things. He's kind. He has, sometimes I feel like a little teary now, like it's like is this okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like he's saying that this man, that your life hasn't been all a piece of cake. It hasn't been all easy, that there is, that you're just trying to struggle through, and that you found a way to be in the world and to be true to yourself at the same time that you can earn a living. You know, it's like you're a balancing act. He's reminding me of a very, very famous poet from the, I don't know, 2500 BC, you know, the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is, they don't know much about him. He wrote the Tao Te Ching, but they say he was probably like a bean counter, like an accountant in some kingdom of China. And he wrote this piece of work, but he wasn't the great Lao Tzu. He'd probably be surprised if he does know that we read his work, that it's been translated in many languages, that he's cherished and treasured, and that it's lasted all these years. I think he's sort of talking a little bit like you, about you, like that you are not somebody expecting to be big and famous and maybe you'd like to be, but you're okay with the quest. You're okay with the journey. And that makes you authentic, and it makes you very beautiful.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
And now, is that your guide, my guide, or just?
What I do, I can only tell you the process. The process is that giving readings for so many years, mostly I read cards, right? We can ask the cards, but giving readings for so many years, 30 years, after a while, you start to become aware of another presence. Sometimes it jumps out at you, and sometimes it's subtle. And then you can conjure it a little, like just by saying, hey, are you there? And then you start to feel something like a little energy, like a little ball of energy. And I don't really understand how it works. Sometimes I think that the ball of energy is a little like Dumbo and the feather, like Dumbo had a feather and he was told, Dumbo the elephant, as long as you hold on to this feather, you'll fly, right? And so sometimes I think that there's this thing going on where they say, it says, or whatever it is, says, I'm here with you. But I don't really know if they are. It's very mysterious and tricky. But if I can see that little ball, that little ball, sometimes it just looks like a glow. Sometimes years ago, it used to look like a little man. And then it was that woman, lately it's become more of just a feeling of thick energy, like a thickness. And if I look for it, it will appear. When I say conjure it, it's not conjure it, it's look for it. It's like suddenly, there's a lot going on that we aren't aware of. If you sit quietly and you just say, I'm going to sit quietly for 10 minutes and I'm going to count as many sounds as I can possibly hear. Well, at first you might just hear some pounding, some pulsing or some electricity. But as you keep on looking, you see more, you hear more and more and more. And you can do it with your body. You can say, okay, I'm going to pay attention to my body. What's going on in my body? Nothing, I'm fine. And then you pay attention, you start to notice pulsing, itching. You can feel the blood rushing. You can feel like aches in places you hadn't even realized you had. They're all happening. It's just awareness. It's becoming aware. So when I say that I can bring the spirit guide in, all it is me paying attention, and then boom, they're right there. And they're almost always right behind me and facing towards you. And then if I tune into them, you say, like, who is it? Is this person, is this your spirit guide, Trey? Trey, I feel a connection with you. And so maybe we've got some of the same guys helping us, but probably there's some of the same and some are not. Like you don't probably have, I don't know if you pay attention to that female that I get, who's this, I call her the Queen of Cups. She's like the Virgin Mary. She's quiet. She is, the Virgin Mary is an archetype, an idea. We don't really know much about her or anything. There's theories, but she's just an idea. And the idea is unconditional love, totally reflecting. She never says anything, right? There's no Bible filled with, there are no books in the New Testament loaded with her teachings. She's just that. And so I get that, I have that entity too. That's the one who came into me that time, is this totally loving, reflecting female entity. But the one who is here right here, if I pay attention, if I look, that just feels a little bit more masculine to me.
I think last time, I'm trying to remember the card that you threw, that I think, I don't know enough about the cards, right? Like if
Was
I
that
were,
not you? A card
yeah,
for you?
I think it was on me. I can't remember what it was. I'm trying to find the text message that you sent. But it's going to take me forever to find it. But I feel like, again, these are just tools for us to connect with something higher than ourselves, right? The cards, like maybe, like, I don't know, like this experience is the N1 experience. It's the case study of Trey, and it's me, like you said, is it about being rich and famous? No, it's about experiencing what we truly are. It's about getting outside of this ego, finding truth, being that truth, and helping others find that truth for me.
That's exactly what I feel about you. Yes.
And the Buddha said, I'm going to butcher this, something about the end goal, but it's not about the end goal. It's about being the path. Basically, you have to be, to walk the path, you have to be the path. And that's what I'm trying. And I'm not going to say trying, because I read a lot of books about body consciousness and us saying things that end up in the body.
Buddha
I'm doing
said-
my best.
He said, you cannot travel the path until you have become the path itself.
There you go. And I hear a lot of quotes about how the end is not as good as the path, how the end is not as good as the journey.
The journey.
And the journey, and we don't appreciate the journey because there's just so many moments of question, so many moments of despair, but you can't know what the top of the mountain feels like without being at the very lowest levels of the valleys, like to experience love. I mean, I think about it quite a bit, where it's like, how do you experience true happiness if you've never experienced true sadness or hell? Like, and I'm not talking about like the occasional anxiety attack. I'm talking about the deepest parts of hell, like the darkest parts, when you're in that situation where everything is going against you. And I tell people, I've been recently telling people more often, tough times don't last, tough people do. But we're just so programmed to not stay in that fire because we don't want to feel pain. We want everything, and especially, during this time that we're living in now, where we self-medicate on things to not feel the pain. We have more access to prescription drugs, alcohol. We don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to deal with the struggle, the anxiety, the stress, the sadness. And we keep trying to avert it, or, we keep trying to run from it. And it's not until we actually go through it that we can experience the other side of that. And that's what life has been for me. It's like been this succession of ups and downs, peaks, valleys. And I have this crazy pulling, and I don't know what it is, pulling me towards this. I have a dream, I have a goal, right? But that goal was put there by somebody. It's more than a dream for me. And I feel this pulling. And every time I ask myself, all I hear is keep going. That's all I hear. Now, is that who's saying that? I don't know, but that's what I keep hearing. I keep seeing synchronicities that are pushing me. And it seems like the theme for me is grit. Seems like the theme for me is perseverance. It seems like at some point, I keep hearing I'm going to write this book. There's been like 4 or 5 mediums that have told me I'm going to write a book, and I have no clue what it's going to be about. And I've been struggling with the concept of even birthing this because I don't know what that looks like. But I don't want it to be a meta-analysis of literature on consciousness. I want it to be my own story. I want it to be the N1. But then it's like, is my story that unique that I can share it with others for them to learn, right? So it's like, it's a paradox for me. It's like, I
It is-
want,
It's going to be unique because you're unique. So it will be. And that's the hardest thing for people who are afraid of writing, that they're not going to be any different, but it will be unique. And you are a searcher. And I think the hardest part is, when you were talking, I thought the hardest part is going to be to figure out, when you write your story is always evolving. It just keeps going. Where do you
it does. It does. It does. I was thinking about that today. I mean, think about your story and how it's evolved and like where you're at. Like, it's just, I think that's why we're, I was speaking earlier about how we are trying to be more love. I think a part of that is the evolution of our consciousness. And when you look at it, I'm just trying to be more love. It's like really looking at that, like really focusing in on the change. Changes doesn't happen all like fast, the way that we think it does, like my, 5G internet or whatever, like it's not that fast. Like, evolution is very slow. I mean, look at us as a species. It was just yesterday, we're hanging from trees, like.
I just keep wondering, when I listen to you, I keep wondering, what if the truth of our striving turns out to be completely the opposite of what we thought? Like, for example, so I'm, doing this work, trying to explore intuition, teaching people about it, the out of body, all those things. But meanwhile, I'm in town politics in my town, speaking up for the environment, speaking up for the downtrodden, like going to meetings. I should have been at a meeting tonight, but I was like, no, it's too, I've got this appointment with you. And then I think, maybe winning, like, I think the town politics is basically, I want the environment to be protected. But then I get really mad at the adversaries, the people who lie, or they don't care about the environment and they let the trees die and all that. And then one day I thought, maybe the real point of all this is to stop being so angry at the people who I think are the bad guys and try to love them. I know that sounds like just like boring almost, but maybe the truth is there. Maybe that's the striving. The striving is to get to know these. And I don't want to love them. Keep in mind, I'm a Taurus, the bull. I want to win, and I have a very strong sense of what's right. Protect the trees, protect the wildlife, tell the truth, and protect the vulnerable people in the town. And I have a lot of preconceived notions about what I think is right. And then one day I start to think differently. Maybe all that battling, fighting, and researching and trying to win and protect and all that stuff, maybe that's just the game that we're put in, and that the real thing, the real striving is with the heart and with loving our adversaries and understanding them. Maybe that's all it is. I don't know, but I know that there's a woman in my town who's been trying to get us all to talk to each other. It's called civil discourse. So there are all these politicians, local politicians, or people running for office, or people who are advocates, and they really don't like each other. They really like, did you hear what she said? And then and she wants us all to sit down with each other in small groups and really get to know each other, people you don't like. And I always volunteer for this because I know that when I have done it, I've done it a few times, it's just your heart just opens, and it doesn't mean you agree with their position, but you feel love for them, and you feel like it's okay. You feel the way you would feel if this was your brother or your sister or your child, and they just have an opposite viewpoint as you, but you know them as children, you know their heart, and so you can disagree, but you still feel loving. And that is not easy in politics. Let me tell you, it's not, especially because people want to win. I'm sure it's the same in corporate world or litigation. And I mean, these issues of competitiveness, very Western issues of competitiveness come up, and the heart clenches and shuts. And you think that winning is the thing because you're so right, you're on the side of right. And then you discover, I wonder, I can't say I know, but I just wonder if really the real truth is exactly the opposite. The journey is the opposite.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, is it the hero's journey, or is it just being aware that there's somebody out there played by the ego, that there is a hero's journey, and the real game is to be emotionally intelligent about what's going on, or aware of what's going on around you. It's crazy to think about. Like, I struggle with that all the time, like.
I bet you do.
I mean, I'm a Taurus too. Like,
Oh, I'll have to ask later about what your date of birth is, because we should put that on tape unless you can edit it out.
I just, I could talk to you all night.
You act more gentle. I mean, I'm a Taurus. I'm like, and I do all this meditation, and I lead people in meditation, and I feel the love so beautifully. And I can talk about a state of mind. I can fill myself with light. I can fill the room with light. I can fill the house with light. And then it's my light. And I can fill the country with it. And then I can have my students or whoever shows up for meditation do it. And we're all just these light beings, and we love and we love, and it's real. It's real. And all my enemies or people or adversaries, all the people I don't like, and everything's okay. And you can feel it. It's real. And it's not easy to hold on to that state.
No, it's not. I was emotionally intelligent today, though, because I was in a situation where I was just surrounded with a lot of ignorance and
Really
ego. Yeah, it was just, it was but I was aware. Like, I was in it, but I was aware of it, right? Like, so I think that's the name of the game sometimes. But then again, it's like, I don't know, there's a couple of viewpoints that I have about what it is that we're here to do. Like, is it to be the creator, to create, or is it to be like the Buddha and live the middle way, or is it to be, to live the hero's journey? I don't know. I mean, there's just so many different things.
maybe it's all of the above.
Maybe it is all the above, and just finding that balance.
And sometimes you are the creator, and sometimes you are just the explorer. And sometimes you're both at this. I mean, I'd say we're both.
Yeah, I don't know, because like, you pick up a book, and like, depending on what dogma it is or what type of modality, it's like, try to nothingness, Zen Buddhist, the beginner's mind, and then you pick up Joseph Campbell's work, and that inspires you to pack your bags and head down the street, pursuing that dream. But then it's, I think it is a medium. I think, Aristotle, the golden mean, I think, between the virtue and the vice, I think has a lot to do with it. I think a lot of the Stoics, I mean, everybody has some great philosophy on what we should be doing here. Really, it's just like taking, melding all of that stuff together, and just kind of picking what fits you and your personality, I guess.
I think that I think a lot of us out there are working on love right now. We're working on trying to heal the shadow or find understanding and love. It's
Sure.
it's what we need to do. It's what I need personally to do. And every single day I spend a lot of time, a ridiculous amount of time, trying to heal my feelings of towards people, and trying to understand them, and trying to love them. And I would say that the people I do easily love, I would say that my love for those people has reached new heights. And then there's the people I find hard to love. And I don't know, it's good exercise. That's all I can say. It's good exercise. In fact, the reason I was almost late tonight is because there was a person on my website who posted something that was against my rules. And I couldn't feel love for that person because I don't know them, and they're just writing. So I sent the guy, I don't even know if it's a male or female. I sent him a letter and I said, call me. Here's my phone number, call me so we can talk, because I knew that the moment the phone rang and I heard his voice or her voice, my love would happen. Unless the person was really creepy or scary, but that's so rare. That's so not happens. I can't tell you how many times. It's so rare that when I meet somebody and talk to them, I can't even remember when that's happened actually. So it's just doesn't seem to happen anymore. What happens is the opposite. I start by feeling nervous. Is this person okay? It's all virtual. I don't know who they are. I can't see a face. And then if I can talk to them, if I can hear their voice, then it's like this big sigh of relief, and then love. And it happens with, people who help you online when you call into customer service, same sort of thing. I think the practice of love, which is hard for me and my Taurus, the bull. Okay, it isn't easy. Some people would be surprised to hear that. Other people would say, yeah, I know, Jeanne. But I think that the work is paying off, because I do feel more love, that I have more love in me. And love is a really infinite thing. I mean, you just cannot get enough of it. It's endless and infinite, how much love you can feel. And then there are, of course, the love gurus like Thich Nhat Hanh. And I think of him as probably the supreme love guru. He'd love everybody, love everyone, love everything. And I used to be surprised when I didn't, like he would say, love, feel empathy and love for the girl who threw, there's some story, threw herself overboard, the young girl who threw herself overboard because she was raped by a pirate, and then love the pirate who did that. And I remember when I first read that, and I was like, no, no. But I really reached that point. Now, not that I could love someone who did that to somebody close to me, but at least I can do it for people. I can do it now. And I can do it. It's just understanding. It is not really, it's not rocket science. It's just understanding them. And the people I can't love are people I don't understand.
I think that's a lot, right? A lot of people are like that. Like, why do we hate people? Why do we hate people?
I'm viewing them with something that isn't necessarily who they are.
We hate what we don't understand.
We sure do. And we have traumas, we have demons, we have things that have happened to us when we were little, and then when we meet people we don't understand who trigger something, then we're like, that's the demon. And so, and that hurts us. That hurts us. And I'm very focused on that these days. It doesn't mean that I've achieved what I want. I find people in my circle who really do they've done so much work, and they're so loving. And I lean on them. I call them, I ask them, what do you think of this? Help me, help me, help me. I really want to, it's not that easy to have a lot of responsibility and have a lot of things you have to get done, and be an administrator, and also to do your work and to be loving, because the heart gets clenched. It clenches when you're overworked, when you're overstressed, and you have to take care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, it's easy. You become the most loving creature on earth. So But it's also about understanding and really working on it to try to understand people. It's a big task. I sometimes think that's the task.
Sure. Like we're here for a reason, right? Like our consciousness is here for a reason. It's not to keep escaping the body and going back, right? Like we're here for a reason. It's to learn, it's to grow, it's to evolve. So it's like, I got to keep, we got to keep remembering that we're here for a reason. It's, when we'll finally know that day when we pass away, but until then we're here to learn, to grow, to love.
I started by telling you about everyday intuition and how I've been teaching that. And if that is worth anything, and I know it is, the feelings that you get, so you go towards what it makes you happy, you go towards what makes you open and expand. That's everyday intuition. So whenever you feel love for someone, and I'm not talking romantic love. Romantic love is a whole like other level of rush, but just everyday love. Just the more you love that cashier who you didn't even bother to look at when you went to the store. And then you start to focus on them, that same old cashier, and you think, I care about that person. I want to send care to that person. And after a while, your heart just opens and it feels so damn good. That has to be what we're here for. It has to be, because so much of the pain in our lives, in the world, is from that lack of love. And when you love, it's just like I was going to say heaven on earth, and I'm not religious, but it is. It's like heaven on earth. And all of the great thinkers, all the great ancient people and the great ancient religions and schools of thought are all that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Why? Because they are just like you. They're in you. They could be, somebody was saying on my site, he was struggling with his shadow, and he said, I just don't know. I don't want these feelings, but I really hate the Russian soldiers. He actually said something far more graphic than that, who were invading Ukraine. And so I had a conversation with him via email, and I said, what if one of those Russian soldiers was your 17-year-old son? There are a lot of them are teenagers. What if it was your 17, 18-year-old son? And you were focusing on him, and he was invading Ukraine because he was Russian and he was a soldier, and that's what he was doing. Now, how do you feel? And he didn't answer because this was email. But I put myself in my shoes and I said back to myself, I said, I don't want him harmed. I'm sorry that he is doing that. I'm thinking of every excuse I can for why he's doing that. Maybe he didn't have any choice. Maybe he had to do it. Maybe he was brainwashed into thinking that all the Ukrainians are Nazis. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here. But the main thing is, I'm going to look for a reason that doesn't involve that he's evil, because he's my son and I saw him as a baby and I've loved him and I know him, and he can go wrong. He can go the wrong way. He can do something wrong, but that doesn't mean he's evil. And so now I just say, okay, they're all your son. Every single one of them is your son. Might as well be. You don't know them. And so again, your heart, what does it do to your heart? It doesn't mean that you don't want to protect the people who are being harmed. But what good does it do to hate the people doing the harm? It's not accurate anyway. It's not accurate. It's untrue. You don't know those people. So all I'm saying is that I think that's why we're here. Because at least I think that that's what makes us happy and makes us feel alive, is to love.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, we can't fake it, but what can we do to get there? That's the work, in my view. I don't always do that work, but I'm trying. It's hard for a Taurus, especially when you see red.
Well, how do people connect with you? Where can they go to join your community?
Well, I have a website that's my name, Jeanne, Jeanne, Mayell, Mayell.com. And there's a forum that's .com/community. And on Wednesday nights for the last 2 years and for the foreseeable future at 7 p.m. Eastern, I lead a meditation group called the Circle of Light. It's free. You can come. You can also go on the site and you can, if you decide you like what you see, you can become a member of the forum. It's free. And if you want a reading, and my readings they're like deep dive of understanding. And yeah, I can do all those things that people who give readings do, but mostly people feel loved and understood. It's not so much about telling the future. I can see the direction of things. I can do more specifics, but really what do people get out of it is they feel better about themselves. So yeah, you can try that, jeannemayell.com, and you can see if I'm teaching a class.
Jeanne, I can't thank you enough for joining the show. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I think we talked for 2 hours.